Question 1. Stakeholder feedback indicates that there may have been instances of unauthorized assistance provided to certain candidates during the recent Hawash private university entrance examination, potentially compromising the fairness of the assessment process. Option A. Initiate a comprehensive and impartial investigation into the alleged irregularities, gathering evidence and applying the university's established examination regulations to determine the validity of the claims and take appropriate action. Option B. Publicly announce that all feedback regarding irregularities is being taken seriously and will be reviewed, but take no immediate investigative action pending further clarification from the stakeholders. Option C. Immediately disqualify all candidates who were mentioned in the feedback, regardless of the evidence. To demonstrate a commitment to fairness, Option D. Conduct a superficial review of the feedback, focusing only on minor procedural issues, and dismiss the more serious allegations of unauthorized assistance due to a lack of immediate, irrefutable proof. Correct answer is A. Initiate a comprehensive and impartial investigation into the alleged irregularities, gathering evidence and applying the university's established examination regulations to determine the validity of the claims and take appropriate action. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between maintaining academic integrity and responding to external pressures that could compromise fairness. The university entrance exam is a critical gatekeeping mechanism, and any perception of bias or unfair advantage can erode public trust and the institution's reputation. Careful judgment is required to ensure that all candidates are evaluated based on the same objective criteria, as mandated by the Hawash private university's regulatory framework for admissions. The correct approach involves a thorough, impartial investigation into the alleged irregularities, adhering strictly to the established procedures outlined in the Hawash private university's examination regulations. This ensures that any decision made is based on verifiable evidence and is consistent with the principles of fairness and equal opportunity. The regulatory justification lies in upholding the integrity of the examination process, which is paramount for maintaining the credibility of the university and its admission standards. Ethically, this approach demonstrates a commitment to transparency and due process for all candidates. An incorrect approach would be to immediately dismiss the feedback without any investigation. This fails to uphold the university's responsibility to address potential breaches of its examination regulations and could lead to a situation where unfair advantages are not rectified, thereby undermining the principle of equal opportunity. Ethically, this demonstrates a lack of diligence and a disregard for the concerns raised by stakeholders. Another incorrect approach would be to implement immediate punitive measures against all candidates based solely on the feedback, without establishing concrete evidence of wrongdoing. This violates the principle of innocent until proven guilty and could unfairly penalize deserving candidates. This approach would contravene the university's regulations regarding fair assessment and due process. A third incorrect approach would be to selectively investigate only certain candidates, or to allow external influence to dictate the outcome of the investigation. This would introduce bias and compromise the impartiality of the examination process, directly violating the university's commitment to objective evaluation and fair admission. Such actions would severely damage the university's reputation and its adherence to its own regulatory framework. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to established regulations and ethical principles. This involves 1. Acknowledging and documenting all feedback received. 2. Initiating a formal, impartial investigation process as stipulated by university policy. 3. Gathering objective evidence to substantiate or refute the claims. 4. Making decisions based solely on the findings of the investigation and in accordance with university regulations. 5. Communicating the process and outcomes transparently, where appropriate and permissible. Question 2. The audit findings indicate a potential deviation in the administration of the Hawash private university entrance examination concerning the handling of candidate documentation prior to the exam commencement. Which of the following actions best aligns with the regulatory framework, laws, and guidelines for this specific university entrance exam? Option A. Address only the aspects of the audit findings that are easily rectified and do not require significant changes to current practices, while deferring the investigation of other findings. Option B. Implement a new, comprehensive set of documentation handling protocols for all future examinations, without first analyzing the specific audit findings or consulting existing university regulations. Option C. Immediately disregard the audit findings, as they are likely based on minor procedural oversights that do not impact the overall fairness of the examination. Option D. Conduct a detailed review of the specific audit findings against Hawash Private University's official examination administration policies and procedures. And if a deviation is confirmed, implement targeted corrective actions as outlined in the university's disciplinary and procedural guidelines for examination staff. The correct answer is D. Conduct a detailed review of the specific audit findings against Hawash Private University's official examination administration policies and procedures, and if a deviation is confirmed, implement targeted corrective actions as outlined in the university's disciplinary and procedural guidelines for examination staff. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires navigating potential conflicts between academic integrity, university policy, and the ethical obligations of an administrator. The administrator must ensure that the entrance examination process is fair, transparent, and adheres strictly to Hawash Private University's established regulations for admissions and examinations. The core of the challenge lies in upholding the integrity of the examination process while responding to an audit finding that suggests a deviation from established protocols. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the audit findings against the specific regulatory framework, laws, and guidelines of Hawash Private University's entrance exam. This means identifying the exact nature of the deviation, determining if it constitutes a breach of policy, and then implementing corrective actions that are aligned with university statutes and examination board directives. This approach is correct because it prioritizes adherence to the defined regulatory framework, ensuring that all admissions decisions are made in accordance with the university's established rules and procedures, thereby safeguarding the fairness and credibility of the entrance examination. It also demonstrates a commitment to accountability and continuous improvement by addressing audit findings directly and systematically. An incorrect approach that involves immediately dismissing the audit findings without proper investigation fails to uphold the principle of accountability and may overlook genuine procedural flaws that could compromise the integrity of the examination. This approach neglects the university's internal governance and audit processes, potentially leading to a recurrence of the issue and undermining trust in the admission system. Another incorrect approach, such as implementing sweeping changes to the examination process without a clear understanding of the specific findings or consulting the relevant university regulations, is also professionally unacceptable. This can lead to unintended consequences, create new procedural weaknesses, and may not effectively address the root cause identified by the audit. It demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a failure to follow established protocols for policy modification. Furthermore, an approach that involves selectively addressing only the aspects of the audit findings that are convenient or easy to rectify, while ignoring more complex or potentially embarrassing issues, is ethically unsound. This selective application of corrective measures undermines the spirit of the audit and fails to ensure comprehensive compliance with the university's regulatory framework. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic approach. 1. Acknowledge and thoroughly review the audit findings. 2. Consult the specific regulatory framework, laws, and guidelines of Hawash Private University pertaining to entrance examinations and admissions. 3. Identify the precise nature of the deviation from established protocols. 4. Assess the impact of the deviation on the fairness and integrity of the examination process. 5. Develop and implement corrective actions that are directly responsive to the findings and fully compliant with university regulations. 6. Document all actions taken and communicate them to relevant stakeholders. 7. Establish mechanisms for ongoing monitoring to prevent recurrence. Question 3. Governance review demonstrates potential irregularities in the administration of the Hawash Private University entrance examination, including allegations of leaked questions and unauthorized assistance provided to certain candidates. The university's Academic Integrity Committee is tasked with addressing these concerns. Which of the following represents the most appropriate course of action for the committee to uphold the integrity of the admissions process and comply with university regulations. Option A. Immediately disqualify all candidates from the affected examination session and announce a new examination date to demonstrate a zero-tolerance policy, without a detailed investigation into individual cases. Option B. Instruct the examination administrators to subtly adjust grading criteria for the affected session to mitigate the impact of any potential irregularities, without formally investigating the allegations. Option C. Publicly dismiss the allegations to avoid negative publicity and maintain confidence in the university's admissions process, assuming the claims are unsubstantiated without further inquiry. Option D. Initiate a comprehensive and impartial investigation into the alleged irregularities, gathering evidence and interviewing relevant parties to determine the extent of any misconduct and its impact on the examination results, following established university procedures for academic misconduct. The correct answer is D. Initiate a comprehensive and impartial investigation into the alleged irregularities, gathering evidence and interviewing relevant parties to determine the extent of any misconduct and its impact on the examination results, following established university procedures for academic misconduct. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires navigating the delicate balance between academic integrity, institutional reputation, and the ethical obligations of faculty members. The university entrance exam is a critical gatekeeping mechanism, and any compromise to its fairness or security can have far-reaching consequences, including undermining public trust in the institution and potentially admitting unqualified students. The pressure to maintain high admission rates or to accommodate specific student groups can create ethical dilemmas. The correct approach involves a thorough, impartial investigation into the alleged irregularities, adhering strictly to Hawash private universities' established policies and procedures for academic misconduct and examination security. This approach is ethically justified by the principle of fairness and equity, ensuring that all applicants are assessed on their own merits. It is also regulatorily compliant with the implicit requirement of any educational institution to uphold the integrity of its admissions process, as mandated by the university's charter and any governing educational bodies in Syria. This involves documenting all findings, interviewing relevant parties, and making a decision based on objective evidence, thereby protecting the validity of the entrance exam. An incorrect approach would be to dismiss the allegations without a proper investigation. This is ethically unacceptable, as it fails to address potential breaches of academic integrity and fairness, potentially allowing unqualified students to gain admission through illicit means. Regulatorily, it could be seen as a failure to uphold the university's own standards and potentially violate any oversight regulations concerning examination integrity. Another incorrect approach would be to immediately impose punitive measures without due process or sufficient evidence. This is ethically problematic as it violates the principle of natural justice, assuming guilt before proof. Regulatorily, it could lead to appeals and legal challenges, damaging the university's reputation and potentially violating due process clauses within the university's own statutes or Syrian educational law. A further incorrect approach would be to attempt to conceal the allegations or findings to protect the university's image. This is a severe ethical breach, undermining transparency and accountability. It also carries significant regulatory risk, as discovered misconduct can lead to sanctions from accrediting bodies or governmental educational authorities, and can severely damage the institution's credibility. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve 1. Acknowledging the seriousness of the allegations and initiating a formal review process. 2. Consulting relevant university policies and procedures regarding academic integrity and examination conduct. 3. Ensuring the investigation is conducted by an impartial committee or individual. 4. Gathering all relevant evidence, including witness statements and documentation. 5. Providing the accused parties with an opportunity to respond to the allegations. 6. Making a decision based on the evidence, in accordance with established policies. 7. Documenting the entire process and the final decision. 8. Communicating the outcome appropriately while respecting privacy. Question 4. The risk matrix shows a high likelihood of unconscious bias influencing admissions decisions for the upcoming academic year, particularly concerning candidates from diverse socioeconomic backgrounds. The admissions committee is tasked with developing a strategy to address this identified risk. Which of the following represents the most appropriate and compliant approach for Al-Hawash Private University? Option A. Implement a standardized scoring rubric for all application components. Train the admissions committee on recognizing and mitigating unconscious bias, and conduct a post-admissions review of a sample of decisions to ensure adherence to objective criteria. Option B. Prioritize applicants who demonstrate strong leadership potential and extracurricular achievements, as these are often indicators of future success, regardless of their socioeconomic background. Option C. Acknowledge the risk but proceed with the current admissions process, assuming that the university's established reputation will naturally attract qualified candidates fairly. Option D. Rely on the experienced judgment of the admissions committee members to identify promising candidates, trusting their inherent fairness to overcome any potential biases. The correct answer is A. Implement a standardized scoring rubric for all application components. Train the admissions committee on recognizing and mitigating unconscious bias, and conduct a post-admissions review of a sample of decisions to ensure adherence to objective criteria. Explanation. The scenario presents a common challenge in academic institutions, balancing the need for robust admissions processes with the ethical imperative to avoid discrimination and ensure fairness. The risk matrix, a tool for identifying and assessing potential threats, highlights the risk of biased admissions decisions. This is professionally challenging because admissions officers must navigate subjective elements of candidate evaluation while adhering strictly to Al-Hawash Private University's stated admission policies and any overarching regulatory guidelines governing higher education admissions in the relevant jurisdiction. The university's reputation and the integrity of its student body depend on impartial and transparent admissions. The correct approach involves a systematic review of the admissions process to identify and mitigate potential biases, ensuring that all candidates are evaluated based on objective criteria outlined in the university's official admissions policy. This aligns with the ethical principles of fairness and equal opportunity and any applicable regulations that prohibit discrimination in educational admissions. By focusing on objective criteria and implementing checks for unconscious bias, the university upholds its commitment to merit-based admissions and avoids potential legal or reputational damage. An incorrect approach that relies solely on the subjective gut feeling of the admissions committee fails to establish objective standards and opens the door to unconscious bias, violating the principle of fair evaluation. This approach lacks transparency and accountability, making it difficult to defend against accusations of discrimination. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes candidates based on personal connections or perceived social status directly contravenes ethical standards of impartiality and meritocracy, and likely violates university policy and any governing regulations against favoritism. Finally, an approach that dismisses the risk matrix findings as mere administrative hurdles ignores the potential for significant ethical and regulatory breaches, demonstrating a lack of due diligence and a disregard for institutional integrity. Professionals in admissions should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough understanding of the institution's admission policies and relevant legal and ethical guidelines. They should then critically analyze identified risks, such as those highlighted by the risk matrix, and develop concrete strategies to mitigate them. This involves establishing clear, objective evaluation criteria, providing training on bias awareness, and implementing review mechanisms to ensure consistent and fair application of policies. Regular review and updating of these processes are crucial to maintaining integrity. Question 5. Investigation of a proctor's observation during the Al-Hawash Private University entrance exam reveals a candidate subtly referencing a small, pre-written note concealed within their sleeve. The proctor is aware that the university's entrance exam regulations strictly prohibit any form of external aids or unauthorized materials. What is the most appropriate course of action for the proctor? Strictly adhering to Al-Hawash Private University's entrance exam regulatory framework. Option A. Confront the candidate publicly, demanding an explanation and immediately disqualifying them from the exam. Option B. Ignore the incident to avoid disrupting the exam environment and potentially causing distress to other candidates. Option C. Discreetly confiscate the note and issue a formal warning to the candidate, documenting the incident for review by the examination committee. Option D. Allow the candidate to continue the exam, but make a mental note to report the observation later, without immediate action. The correct answer is C. Discreetly confiscate the note and issue a formal warning to the candidate, documenting the incident for review by the examination committee. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a student's desire for academic success and the university's commitment to academic integrity. The entrance exam is a critical gateway, and any deviation from its established procedures or ethical standards can have severe consequences for both the student and the institution. The pressure to perform well can lead individuals to consider shortcuts, making adherence to regulatory frameworks paramount. The correct approach involves a thorough understanding and strict application of Hawash Private University's entrance exam regulations. This means ensuring all examination materials are handled according to the prescribed protocols, that no unauthorized assistance is provided, and that any suspected irregularities are reported through the designated channels. This approach is ethically sound and legally compliant because it upholds the principles of fairness, transparency, and meritocracy that underpin the university's admission process. Adhering to these regulations protects the integrity of the examination and ensures that all candidates are evaluated on their own merits, as mandated by the university's governing policies. An incorrect approach would be to overlook minor deviations or to interpret the regulations loosely. For instance, allowing a student to briefly consult notes, even if seemingly insignificant, violates the principle of a standardized and fair assessment. This constitutes a breach of academic integrity and potentially violates specific clauses within the Hawash Private University's examination guidelines that prohibit any form of external aid. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore a suspected violation due to a desire to avoid confrontation or to appear lenient. This failure to report constitutes a dereliction of duty and undermines the university's ability to maintain a credible examination process, potentially leading to the admission of unqualified students and damaging the institution's reputation. Professionals in this situation should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to established rules and ethical conduct. This involves 1. Clearly identifying the relevant regulations and guidelines governing the examination. 2. Objectively assessing the situation against these regulations. 3. Following the prescribed reporting procedures for any suspected violations. 4. Maintaining impartiality and avoiding personal biases or external pressures. 5. Documenting all actions taken and observations made. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are defensible, compliant, and aligned with the overarching goal of maintaining academic integrity. Question 6. Operational review demonstrates that a candidate for the Hawash Private University entrance exam has received extensive, albeit informal, preparation from a private tutor who is also a faculty member at the university. This preparation focused on the specific format and content areas of the entrance exam. The candidate's performance in the exam was exceptionally high, considering the regulatory framework of the Hawash Private University entrance exam. What is the most appropriate course of action for the admissions committee? Option A. Initiate a review process to assess if the informal preparation provided an unfair advantage, potentially leading to a reevaluation of the candidate's admission based on a broader set of criteria if the advantage is deemed significant and contrary to the spirit of the examination regulations. Option B. Automatically disqualify the candidate due to the potential for an unfair advantage, even without concrete proof of rule violation, to maintain the perceived integrity of the examination. Option C. Grant the candidate admission but flag their file for future monitoring, acknowledging the high score while attempting to mitigate potential concerns about the preparation method. Option D. Proceed with admitting the candidate based solely on their examination score, as the preparation, while informal, did not violate any explicit rules against external tutoring. The correct answer is D. Proceed with admitting the candidate based solely on their examination score, as the preparation, while informal, did not violate any explicit rules against external tutoring. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the university's operational needs and the strict adherence to its entrance examination regulations. The challenge lies in balancing the desire to admit qualified candidates, potentially those who might have benefited from informal assistance, with the imperative to maintain the integrity and fairness of the admission process as defined by the Hawash Private University Entrance Exam Framework. Misinterpreting or circumventing these regulations can lead to accusations of bias, unfair advantage, and a compromised admissions process, undermining the university's reputation and the validity of its entrance examinations. The correct approach involves a thorough and objective assessment of all candidates strictly against the established criteria and procedures of the Hawash Private University Entrance Exam. This means evaluating each applicant's performance based solely on the examination content, scoring mechanisms, and any other officially sanctioned admission requirements, without regard to external factors or perceived potential. This approach is ethically sound and regulatorily compliant because it upholds the principles of fairness, transparency, and equal opportunity, which are foundational to any credible examination process. Adhering strictly to the defined examination framework ensures that all candidates are judged on the same objective standards, thereby safeguarding the integrity of the entrance exam and the admission decisions. An incorrect approach would be to deviate from the established examination procedures to accommodate a candidate who may have received informal preparation. This could manifest as offering preferential treatment, altering scoring criteria, or introducing subjective elements not outlined in the official regulations. Such actions would constitute a direct violation of the Hawash Private University Entrance Exams regulatory framework. Ethically, it breaches the principle of fairness by creating an uneven playing field. Regulatorily, it undermines the authority and intent of the examination board and its established guidelines, potentially leading to disciplinary action, invalidation of admission, and damage to the university's standing. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore the informal preparation entirely and proceed with the examination as if no external assistance was provided, without any internal review or acknowledgement of the potential issue. While seemingly neutral, this passive approach fails to address a potential breach of examination integrity. The Hawash Private University Entrance Exam Framework likely implies a responsibility to ensure the fairness of the process. Ignoring a known or suspected issue, even without direct intervention, can be seen as a failure to uphold this responsibility, potentially leading to a compromised outcome that is not truly reflective of a candidate's unaided performance. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve 1. Understanding and clearly recalling the specific regulations and guidelines of the Hawash Private University Entrance Exam. 2. Identifying any potential conflicts or ambiguities between operational pressures and regulatory requirements. 3. Prioritizing strict adherence to the established regulatory framework. 4. Consulting with relevant university authorities or examination oversight committees if there is any doubt about the interpretation or application of regulations. 5. Documenting all decisions and actions taken to ensure transparency and accountability. 6. Focusing on objective assessment and fair treatment of all candidates based on the defined examination parameters. Question 7. The evaluation methodology shows a potential breach of examination rules by a candidate during the Hawash Private University Entrance Exam. The invigilator has reported observing suspicious behavior that strongly suggests cheating. What is the most appropriate immediate course of action for the examination board to ensure regulatory compliance and fairness? Option A. Discuss the invigilator's observations with other candidates to gather corroborating evidence before proceeding with any action. Option B. Advise the invigilator to ignore the suspicious behavior due to the high stakes of the entrance exam and the need to avoid disrupting other candidates. Option C. Immediately disqualify the candidate based on the invigilator's report and inform them of their expulsion from the examination. Option D. Document the invigilator's report and initiate a formal investigation process, according to Hawash Private University's academic integrity policy, which includes informing the candidate of the allegations and providing an opportunity to respond before any decision is made. The correct answer is C. Immediately disqualify the candidate based on the invigilator's report and inform them of their expulsion from the examination. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge related to ensuring the integrity of the Hawash Private University Entrance Examination process, specifically concerning the handling of potential academic misconduct. The challenge lies in balancing the need to uphold examination standards and fairness with the procedural rights of candidates. A rigorous and fair approach is paramount to maintaining the university's reputation and the credibility of its admissions. The correct approach involves a systematic and documented investigation into the alleged misconduct, adhering strictly to the Hawash private university's established examination regulations and academic integrity policies. This includes gathering evidence, providing the candidate with an opportunity to respond to the allegations, and ensuring that any disciplinary action is proportionate and consistent with university guidelines. This approach is ethically sound and regulatorily compliant because it prioritizes due process, fairness, and evidence-based decision-making, as mandated by the university's internal regulations for academic conduct. An incorrect approach that involves immediate disqualification without a proper investigation fails to uphold the principle of natural justice. It bypasses the necessary steps to verify the allegations and provide the candidate with a defense, potentially leading to an unjust outcome and legal challenges. Another incorrect approach, which is to ignore the allegation due to time constraints, demonstrates a dereliction of duty and a failure to enforce the university's academic integrity standards. This undermines the fairness of the examination for all candidates and erodes trust in the admissions process. Finally, an approach that involves discussing the allegation with other candidates before a formal investigation is a breach of confidentiality and could prejudice the investigation, creating an unfair environment for the accused candidate. Professionals in this situation should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the alleged violation and consulting the relevant university policies and examination regulations. The next step is to initiate a formal, documented investigation process, ensuring all evidence is collected and preserved. Crucially, the candidate must be informed of the allegations and given a fair opportunity to present their case. Decisions should be made based on the findings of the investigation and in strict accordance with the university's disciplinary procedures. This structured approach ensures fairness, transparency, and compliance with regulatory requirements. Question 8. When evaluating an applicant's submission for the Hawash private university entrance exam, a committee member receives an anonymous email alleging that the applicant's submitted academic transcripts may have been altered. The committee member has no other information or evidence to corroborate this claim. What is the most appropriate course of action for the committee member to ensure regulatory compliance and ethical conduct? Option A. Share the anonymous email with other committee members to gauge their opinion on how to proceed without conducting an independent investigation. Option B. Inform the applicant directly about the anonymous allegation and request them to provide further proof of their transcript's authenticity. Option C. Conduct a discreet, independent investigation into the applicant's academic history from their previous institutions, seeking official verification of the submitted transcripts before making any decision. Option D. Immediately disregard the anonymous email and proceed with the evaluation based solely on the submitted documents, as there is no verifiable evidence of misconduct. The correct answer is D. Immediately disregard the anonymous email and proceed with the evaluation based solely on the submitted documents, as there is no verifiable evidence of misconduct. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge related to academic integrity and the ethical responsibilities of an admissions committee member. The core difficulty lies in balancing the university's commitment to fair evaluation with the need to uphold its standards against potential academic misconduct. A committee member must exercise careful judgment to avoid both overlooking genuine academic achievements and unfairly penalizing applicants based on unsubstantiated concerns. The correct approach involves a thorough, evidence-based review of the applicant's submitted materials, focusing on verifiable information and established university policies for evaluating academic credentials. This approach is ethically sound and aligns with regulatory expectations for fair and transparent admissions processes. It prioritizes objective assessment and adherence to established procedures, ensuring that decisions are based on merit and documented evidence, thereby upholding the integrity of the Hawash private university's admissions. An incorrect approach that relies on unsubstantiated rumors or personal biases would fail to meet regulatory and ethical standards. Such an approach would violate principles of fairness and due process, potentially leading to discriminatory outcomes. Furthermore, acting on hearsay without seeking verifiable evidence would undermine the credibility of the admissions process and expose the university to reputational damage and potential challenges to its decisions. Another incorrect approach, that of immediately disqualifying the applicant without any investigation, is equally problematic as it bypasses the fundamental requirement of a fair hearing and objective assessment, violating the principle of natural justice. Professionals in this situation should employ a decision-making framework that emphasizes due diligence, objectivity, and adherence to established policies. This involves 1. Identifying the specific concern, e.g., potential academic misconduct. 2. Gathering all relevant, verifiable evidence related to the concern. 3. Consulting university policies and guidelines for handling such situations. 4. Applying these policies consistently and impartially to the evidence. 5. Documenting the entire process and the rationale for the final decision. This structured approach ensures that decisions are defensible, ethical, and compliant with the university's regulatory framework. Question 9. The control framework reveals a potential conflict of interest where a faculty member involved in setting a specific section of the Hawash private university entrance exam has a close relative applying for admission. This faculty member has access to the draft examination questions for that section. What is the most appropriate course of action to maintain the integrity of the examination process? Option A. Advise the faculty member to withdraw their relative from the application process to avoid any appearance of impropriety. Option B. Immediately report the potential conflict of interest and the faculty member's access to the draft questions to the University Examination Committee and recuse the faculty member from any further involvement in that specific section's review or finalization. Option C. Allow the faculty member to continue their involvement, but instruct them to avoid reviewing the specific questions their relative will be tested on. Option D. Proceed with the examination as planned, assuming the faculty member will act ethically and not misuse their access to the questions. The correct answer is B. Immediately report the potential conflict of interest and the faculty member's access to the draft questions to the University Examination Committee, and recuse the faculty member from any further involvement in that specific section's review or finalization. Explanation. The control framework reveals a potential conflict of interest that requires careful navigation to uphold academic integrity and fairness in the Hawash private university entrance examination process. The challenge lies in balancing the need for comprehensive assessment with the ethical imperative to prevent any undue advantage or bias. A professional in this situation must prioritize adherence to the university's established examination regulations and ethical guidelines. The correct approach involves a transparent and documented escalation of the situation to the appropriate university authority, such as the examination committee or the dean of admissions. This ensures that the decision-making process is handled by those with the mandate to interpret and enforce university policy, thereby safeguarding the integrity of the examination. This approach aligns with the university's regulatory framework by promoting fairness, preventing conflicts of interest, and ensuring that all candidates are assessed on merit. It upholds the ethical principle of impartiality, which is fundamental to any educational institution's admission process. An incorrect approach would be to directly intervene and alter the examination materials without proper authorization. This bypasses the established control framework and could lead to accusations of bias or procedural impropriety, undermining the credibility of the entire examination. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore the potential conflict, which would be a dereliction of professional duty and a violation of ethical standards, potentially allowing an unfair advantage to persist. Finally, attempting to resolve the conflict informally with the involved faculty member without involving the designated oversight bodies would also be professionally unsound, as it lacks the necessary transparency and accountability required by the university's regulatory framework. Professionals should employ a decision-making process that begins with identifying potential ethical or regulatory breaches. This is followed by consulting the relevant university policies and procedures. If a conflict or breach is confirmed, the next step is to report the matter through the designated channels, ensuring all communication is documented. The ultimate goal is to uphold the principles of fairness, integrity, and compliance with the established regulatory framework. Question 10. Analysis of a prospective student's submission for the Hawash private university entrance exam, which includes a personal essay that heavily references and quotes extensively from published academic articles without clear in-text citations or a bibliography, requires a decision on how to proceed. Which of the following actions best aligns with the regulatory framework and ethical guidelines for academic integrity at Al-Hawash Private University? Option A. Accept the essay as submitted, assuming the student's intent was to demonstrate knowledge of the reference material. Option B. Advise the student to remove all quoted material and rewrite the essay using only their own words, without further explanation. Option C. Reject the entire submission immediately due to the apparent lack of proper attribution, citing potential plagiarism. Option D. Request the student to provide a revised version of the essay with proper citations and a bibliography, explaining the university's policy on academic integrity and plagiarism. The correct answer is D. Request the student to provide a revised version of the essay with proper citations and a bibliography, explaining the university's policy on academic integrity and plagiarism. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a student's desire to present their work and the university's academic integrity policies. The need for careful judgment arises from balancing the encouragement of student initiative with the imperative to uphold ethical standards and prevent plagiarism. The correct approach involves a thorough review of Al-Hawash Private University's specific regulations regarding academic integrity, plagiarism, and the proper attribution of sources. This approach is ethically sound and regulatorily compliant because it directly addresses the potential for academic misconduct by seeking to understand and apply the university's established rules. It prioritizes adherence to the defined academic framework, ensuring that any student work presented is original or appropriately credited according to the university's guidelines. This aligns with the core principles of academic honesty that such entrance exams aim to assess. An incorrect approach that involves immediately approving the student's request without verification fails to uphold the university's academic integrity standards. This bypasses the essential due diligence required to prevent plagiarism, potentially exposing the university to reputational damage and undermining the credibility of its admissions process. It demonstrates a lack of commitment to regulatory compliance and ethical conduct. Another incorrect approach, which is to dismiss the student's request outright without understanding the context or the university's specific policies on source usage, is also professionally unacceptable. While it avoids the risk of plagiarism, it can be perceived as overly rigid and unsupportive of student effort, potentially misinterpreting the student's intent. It fails to engage with the university's regulatory framework in a nuanced manner. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic approach. First, clearly identify the relevant university policies and regulations, in this case, Al-Hawash Private University's Academic Integrity and Plagiarism Guidelines. Second, assess the student's request against these specific regulations, considering the intent and potential impact. Third, consult with relevant university authorities or academic advisors if there is any ambiguity. Finally, communicate the decision clearly and ethically, providing justification based on the university's established framework. Question 11. Process analysis reveals that an applicant to Al-Hawash Private University has submitted a strong personal statement and received a glowing recommendation from a former teacher, but their academic transcripts do not fully meet the minimum grade point average requirement stipulated in the university's admission regulations. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the regulatory framework for university entrance exams at Al-Hawash Private University? Option A. Evaluate the applicant based on the strength of their personal statement and recommendation, assuming these demonstrate sufficient potential to overcome the GPA shortfall. Option B. Interpret the minimum GPA requirement flexibly, considering the applicant's overall profile and the perceived positive impact they could have on the university community. Option C. Seek an informal opinion from a senior professor in the applicant's intended field of study to gauge their suitability, even if it means deviating slightly from the strict GPA requirement. Option D. Conduct a thorough review of the applicant's submitted documents, strictly comparing their academic transcripts against the stated minimum GPA requirement, and make a decision based solely on adherence to this documented criterion. The correct answer is A. Evaluate the applicant based on the strength of their personal statement and recommendation, assuming these demonstrate sufficient potential to overcome the GPA shortfall. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in academic institutions where the integrity of the admissions process must be upheld while also ensuring fairness and transparency. The professional challenge lies in balancing the need to adhere strictly to established admission criteria with the potential for individual circumstances or external pressures. Misinterpreting or misapplying admission guidelines can lead to unfair advantages, undermine the credibility of the university, and potentially violate the principles of equal opportunity. Therefore, careful judgment and a thorough understanding of the Hawash private university's admission regulations are paramount. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a meticulous review of the applicant's documentation against the explicitly stated admission requirements of Hawash private university. This method is correct because it directly adheres to the regulatory framework governing admissions. By focusing solely on the documented evidence and comparing it against the established criteria, the admissions committee acts impartially and in accordance with the university's own published guidelines. This ensures that all applicants are evaluated on the same objective standards, preventing bias and upholding the integrity of the entrance examination process. This aligns with the principle of regulatory compliance, where adherence to established rules is the primary directive. Incorrect approaches analysis. An approach that prioritizes personal recommendations over documented qualifications is incorrect because it bypasses the established regulatory framework. Admissions are governed by specific criteria, and personal endorsements, while potentially valuable in other contexts, do not substitute for meeting these objective requirements. This failure constitutes a breach of regulatory compliance by introducing subjective factors that are not part of the official admission process. An approach that seeks to interpret the admission criteria loosely to accommodate the applicant's perceived potential is also incorrect. The regulations of Hawash Private University are designed to be applied consistently. Ambiguity in interpretation, especially when driven by a desire to admit a particular candidate, can lead to arbitrary decisions and a lack of transparency. This undermines the fairness of the process and violates the principle of consistent application of rules, which is a cornerstone of regulatory compliance. An approach that involves consulting with senior faculty for an informal opinion without a formal review process is incorrect. While seeking advice can be beneficial, the formal admission process is defined by specific procedures and documentation. Relying on informal consultations outside of the established protocol can lead to the introduction of biases or the overlooking of critical regulatory requirements. This deviates from the mandated procedures and compromises the integrity of the admissions decision. Professional reasoning. Professionals in academic admissions must adopt a systematic and evidence-based approach. The decision-making process should begin with a clear understanding of the governing regulations and policies. When evaluating an applicant, the primary step is to gather all required documentation and then systematically compare it against each criterion outlined in the university's admission guidelines. Any discrepancies or ambiguities should be addressed through established clarification procedures, not through informal discussions or subjective interpretations. The ultimate decision must be justifiable based on the documented evidence and adherence to the regulatory framework. This ensures fairness, transparency, and accountability in the admissions process. Question 12. Benchmark analysis indicates that prospective students may seek information about the Hawash private university entrance examination. If a candidate approaches a university staff member for advice, what is the most ethically and regulatorily compliant course of action regarding the examination content? Option A. Offer to provide personalized tutoring sessions focused on predicting and answering potential exam questions to ensure the student's success. Option B. Provide general information about the subject areas covered and the format of the exam, advising the student to prepare thoroughly using standard academic resources. Option C. Share specific past examination questions and their correct answers to help the student understand the difficulty level and question types. Option D. Advise the student to focus solely on memorizing key terms and definitions from the syllabus, as this is the primary method of assessment. The correct answer is B. Provide general information about the subject areas covered and the format of the exam, advising the student to prepare thoroughly using standard academic resources. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge rooted in the ethical obligation to maintain academic integrity and uphold the reputation of Hawash Private University. The challenge lies in balancing the need to assist a prospective student with the imperative to prevent academic dishonesty, which could undermine the fairness of the entrance examination process and the credibility of the university's admissions. Careful judgment is required to distinguish between legitimate academic support and unethical assistance that confers an unfair advantage. The correct approach involves providing general guidance on the examination's format and content areas without revealing specific questions or answers. This upholds the principle of fairness by ensuring all candidates are assessed on their own knowledge and preparation. It aligns with the university's regulatory framework for entrance examinations, which implicitly requires a level playing field and prohibits any form of cheating or undue influence. This approach respects the integrity of the assessment process and the university's commitment to admitting qualified students based on merit. An incorrect approach that involves sharing actual past exam questions or providing direct answers to potential questions fails to uphold academic integrity. This constitutes academic misconduct and violates the spirit and likely explicit regulations of the Hawash Private University entrance examination process, which are designed to ensure a fair and objective assessment. Such an action would unfairly advantage one candidate over others, compromising the validity of the examination results and the university's admission standards. Another incorrect approach, offering to coach the student specifically on the exam content in a way that guarantees success, also crosses ethical boundaries. While general academic advice is permissible, coaching that is tailored to bypass the intended assessment of knowledge and skills is tantamount to facilitating cheating. This undermines the purpose of the entrance exam as a measure of a student's readiness for university-level study. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the university's academic integrity policies and examination regulations. Professionals should first identify the ethical boundaries of their role and responsibilities. When faced with a request that borders on or crosses these boundaries, they should err on the side of caution and uphold the principles of fairness and honesty. Seeking guidance from supervisors or the relevant university department responsible for admissions and examinations is a crucial step if there is any ambiguity. The ultimate goal is to protect the integrity of the academic process and the institution's reputation. Question 13. Research into the submitted research proposals for the Hawash Private University entrance exam reveals a proposal that contains several passages closely mirroring content found in a publicly available academic journal article. The admissions committee must decide how to proceed. Which of the following represents the most appropriate course of action according to Hawash Private University's academic integrity guidelines? Option A. Forward the proposal to the university's legal department for an immediate ruling on potential copyright infringement. Option B. Immediately reject the proposal due to the observed similarities, assuming academic dishonesty without further investigation. Option C. Overlook the similarities, assuming they are coincidental, and proceed with evaluating the proposal based on its other merits. Option D. Conduct a thorough plagiarism check using academic integrity software, and, if significant unacknowledged borrowing is confirmed, initiate a formal review process with the applicant, providing an opportunity for explanation. The correct answer is D. Conduct a thorough plagiarism check using academic integrity software, and if significant unacknowledged borrowing is confirmed, initiate a formal review process with the applicant, providing an opportunity for explanation. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge related to academic integrity and the ethical conduct of research within the Hawash Private University framework. The core issue is ensuring that research submitted for the entrance exam is original and adheres to the university's academic standards, preventing plagiarism and upholding the integrity of the admissions process. Careful judgment is required to identify and address potential academic misconduct without unfairly penalizing genuine effort. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the submitted research proposal, specifically looking for evidence of plagiarism or unacknowledged reliance on external sources. This aligns with the Hawash Private University's commitment to academic honesty and the principles of scholarly work, as typically outlined in university regulations concerning research ethics and academic integrity. The university expects all applicants to demonstrate original thought and proper citation practices. An incorrect approach would be to immediately disqualify a candidate based on a superficial similarity to existing work, without conducting a proper investigation. This fails to uphold the principle of fairness and due process, potentially penalizing a student who may have inadvertently used similar phrasing or cited common sources without malicious intent. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore potential plagiarism altogether, which would compromise the integrity of the entrance exam and the university's academic standards. This demonstrates a lack of diligence and a failure to enforce the university's ethical guidelines. Professionals should employ a systematic decision-making process that begins with a clear understanding of the university's academic integrity policies. When potential issues arise, the process should involve a detailed review of the submitted work, comparison with recognized sources, and if necessary, seeking clarification from the applicant. This ensures that decisions are evidence-based, fair, and consistent with the university's commitment to academic excellence and ethical conduct. Question 14. Risk assessment procedures indicate a potential applicant for the Hawash private university entrance exam has submitted academic transcripts that appear to have minor inconsistencies in dates compared to their curriculum vitae, though their overall academic record is strong, and they have received a glowing personal recommendation from a senior faculty member. The admissions committee is under some pressure to meet enrollment targets for the upcoming academic year. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the regulatory framework for the Hawash private university entrance exam? Option A. Overlook the minor date inconsistencies in the academic transcripts, prioritizing the strong overall academic record and the faculty recommendation, and proceed with admitting the applicant to help meet enrollment targets. Option B. Expedite the review process for this applicant, focusing primarily on their overall academic strength and the faculty recommendation, to ensure their admission contributes to meeting the enrollment targets without extensive scrutiny of minor discrepancies. Option C. Conduct a thorough verification of the applicant's academic transcripts and curriculum vitae, cross-referencing all dates and details with official university records or requesting clarification from the applicant, while also ensuring all other entrance examination requirements are met before making a decision. Option D. Accept the applicant based on the senior faculty member's recommendation, assuming the inconsistencies are minor clerical errors and that the faculty member's endorsement is sufficient validation of the applicant's suitability. The correct answer is C. Conduct a thorough verification of the applicant's academic transcripts and curriculum vitae, cross-referencing all dates and details with official university records, or requesting clarification from the applicant, while also ensuring all other entrance examination requirements are met before making a decision. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the university's commitment to academic integrity with the need to provide a fair and transparent admissions process. The admissions committee must adhere strictly to the Hawash private university's established entrance examination regulations, which are designed to ensure a standardized and equitable evaluation of all applicants. Failure to follow these regulations could lead to accusations of bias, unfairness, or even corruption, undermining the credibility of the university and its admissions process. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the applicant's submitted documentation against the specific criteria outlined in the Hawash private university's entrance examination guidelines. This includes verifying the authenticity of academic records, ensuring all required supplementary materials are present, and confirming the applicant meets the minimum eligibility requirements as defined by the university's academic council for the specific program. This approach is correct because it directly aligns with the regulatory framework of the Hawash private university entrance exam, which mandates a systematic and documented evaluation process based on predefined criteria. Adhering to these guidelines ensures fairness, consistency, and accountability, thereby upholding the integrity of the admissions process. An incorrect approach would be to overlook discrepancies in the applicant's academic transcripts due to a perceived strong performance in a non-academic area. This is a regulatory failure because the entrance examination regulations likely specify clear academic prerequisites and documentation requirements. Ignoring these, even with a positive impression of the applicant's other qualities, bypasses the established evaluation framework and introduces subjective bias. Another incorrect approach would be to accept the applicant based on a personal recommendation from a faculty member, without independently verifying the applicant's qualifications against the official entrance exam criteria. This is an ethical and regulatory failure as it deviates from the prescribed, objective assessment process. It creates an unfair advantage for the recommended applicant and undermines the principle of merit-based admissions, potentially violating the spirit and letter of the university's examination regulations. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to expedite the review process for this applicant, assuming their qualifications are sufficient without a detailed check due to pressure to fill a quota. This is a significant regulatory failure. The entrance examination regulations are designed to ensure a thorough and impartial review for all candidates. Expediting the process without due diligence compromises the integrity of the assessment and could lead to the admission of unqualified candidates, violating the university's commitment to academic standards. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic adherence to the established regulatory framework. This means meticulously reviewing all submitted documents against the defined criteria, seeking clarification from the applicant or relevant departments when necessary, and documenting every step of the decision-making process. If any aspect of an application raises concerns or appears to deviate from the regulation, the professional should consult the official guidelines or seek advice from a supervisor or the admissions committee to ensure compliance and maintain the integrity of the process. Question 15. Comparative studies suggest that university entrance examinations are critical gateways to higher education, and maintaining their integrity is paramount. During the Hawash private university entrance exam, an invigilator observes a candidate discreetly consulting a small, folded piece of paper containing what appear to be handwritten notes. The university's examination regulations explicitly prohibit the use of any unauthorized materials, including notes, during the exam. What is the most appropriate course of action for the invigilator to uphold the integrity of the examination process according to Hawash Private University's regulatory framework? Option A. Discreetly confiscate the unauthorized notes and follow the university's established procedure for reporting academic misconduct to the examination committee. Option B. Publicly confront the candidate and demand the notes, creating a scene to deter others. Option C. Ignore the notes to avoid disrupting the exam and potentially causing distress to the candidate. Option D. Confiscate the notes but allow the candidate to continue the exam without further reporting. The correct answer is A. Discreetly confiscate the unauthorized notes and follow the university's established procedure for reporting academic misconduct to the examination committee. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires navigating the ethical considerations of academic integrity against the backdrop of university entrance exam regulations. The core tension lies in ensuring a fair and equitable assessment process for all applicants, while upholding the university's commitment to admitting students based on their own merit. The pressure to perform well in entrance exams can lead some individuals to seek unfair advantages, making vigilance and adherence to established protocols paramount. The correct approach involves strictly adhering to the Hawash private university's stated examination regulations regarding the use of external materials and assistance. This means confiscating any unauthorized items and reporting the incident according to the university's disciplinary procedures. This approach is correct because it directly upholds the principles of academic integrity and fairness enshrined in the university's entrance exam framework. By following the established rules, the invigilator ensures that all candidates are assessed on an equal footing, preventing any applicant from gaining an unfair advantage through prohibited means. This aligns with the university's regulatory obligation to conduct a transparent and impartial examination. An incorrect approach would be to ignore the presence of the unauthorized notes, thereby allowing the student to potentially benefit from them. This failure constitutes a direct violation of the Hawash private university's examination regulations and undermines the integrity of the entire entrance process. Ethically, it is a dereliction of duty as an invigilator to permit cheating, as it compromises the fairness of the assessment for all other candidates. Another incorrect approach would be to confront the student publicly and demand the notes without following the prescribed reporting procedure. While this might seem like an immediate action, it bypasses the university's established disciplinary framework. This can lead to an uncontrolled situation, potentially causing disruption to other candidates, and failing to ensure that the incident is documented and handled according to the university's official guidelines. This approach risks procedural impropriety and could lead to an ineffective resolution of the academic misconduct. A further incorrect approach would be to confiscate the notes, but then allow the student to continue the exam without any further action or reporting. This is a partial adherence to the rules, but ultimately fails to address the academic misconduct. It leaves the student with an unaddressed violation and does not uphold the university's commitment to a fair assessment process. The lack of reporting means the university is unaware of potential breaches, hindering its ability to maintain the credibility of its entrance examinations. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the Hawash Private University's examination regulations and ethical guidelines. When a potential violation is observed, the professional should 1. Remain calm and discreet. 2. Identify the specific regulation being violated. 3. Follow the established procedure for handling such violations, which typically involves discreetly confiscating prohibited items and reporting the incident to the designated authority within the university. 4. Document the incident accurately and objectively. 5. Avoid any actions that could compromise the integrity of the examination or unfairly prejudice the candidate before a formal decision is made by the university's disciplinary body. Question 16. Compliance review shows that a faculty member who taught a preparatory course for the Hawash Private University entrance exam has been assigned to review examination papers. The faculty member has a professional relationship with several candidates who took the preparatory course. What is the most appropriate course of action to ensure regulatory compliance and academic integrity? Option A. Faculty members should immediately recuse themselves from reviewing any papers and report the potential conflict of interest to the admissions committee for reassignment. Option B. The faculty member should review the papers, but prioritize the assessment of candidates they did not teach in the preparatory course, and only review their former students' papers if absolutely necessary. Option C. The faculty member should proceed with the review, ensuring they remain objective and fair in their assessment of all papers, including those of their former students. Option D. The faculty member should delegate the review of their former students' papers to a junior faculty member who is aware of the situation. The correct answer is C. The faculty member should proceed with the review, ensuring they remain objective and fair in their assessment of all papers, including those of their former students. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the potential for conflicts of interest and the need to uphold academic integrity, which are core tenets of university operations and regulatory compliance. The Hawash Private University Entrance Exam Framework mandates strict adherence to ethical conduct and fair assessment practices. A careful judgment is required to ensure that any review process is impartial and does not compromise the fairness of the entrance examination. The correct approach involves a transparent and documented process for reviewing examination materials, ensuring that all faculty members involved in the review are free from any personal or professional connections to the candidates whose papers they might assess. This aligns with the university's commitment to merit-based admissions and the regulatory expectation of unbiased evaluation. Specifically, the university's internal regulations, as outlined in the faculty handbook, and the admissions policy emphasize the importance of avoiding conflicts of interest in all academic processes, including admissions. This approach ensures that the review is conducted objectively, safeguarding the integrity of the entrance exam and maintaining public trust in the university's admission standards. An incorrect approach that involves a faculty member reviewing the papers of their own students from a preparatory course would be a significant ethical and regulatory failure. This creates a direct conflict of interest, as the faculty member may be unconsciously or consciously biased towards their students, undermining the fairness of the assessment. Such an action violates the principle of impartiality expected in any evaluation process and contravenes the university's stated policies on academic integrity and conflict of interest. Another incorrect approach, where a faculty member reviews papers without disclosing a close personal relationship with a candidate, also constitutes a serious breach. This lack of transparency prevents the university from taking appropriate measures to mitigate the conflict, such as reassigning the review. It directly violates the ethical obligation to disclose potential conflicts and compromises the integrity of the admissions process. Finally, an approach where a faculty member delegates the review of potentially conflicted papers to a junior colleague without proper oversight or disclosure is also unacceptable. This not only fails to address the conflict, but also places undue responsibility on a less experienced individual, and potentially exposes the university to further compliance issues if the junior colleague is also unable to maintain impartiality. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a proactive identification of potential conflicts of interest, a thorough understanding of the university's ethical guidelines and conflict of interest policies, and a commitment to transparency and disclosure. When a potential conflict arises, the professional should immediately report it to their supervisor or the relevant committee, seeking guidance on how to proceed in a manner that upholds academic integrity and regulatory compliance. Question 17. Regulatory review indicates that Al-Hawash Private University's admissions office is under pressure to increase enrollment numbers for the upcoming academic year. A proposal has been made to slightly relax the interpretation of the minimum score requirements for the entrance examination in specific subjects, with the justification that this will attract more applicants who might otherwise be deterred by the perceived difficulty. Which of the following represents the most appropriate course of action for the admissions office, strictly adhering to the principles of academic integrity and regulatory compliance expected of Al-Hawash Private University? Option A. Publicly communicate the actual, unaltered minimum score requirements for all subjects of the entrance examination, while also providing resources and guidance to prospective students on how to prepare effectively for these requirements. Option B. Implement a revised scoring rubric for the entrance examination that subtly lowers the passing threshold for certain subjects, without explicitly announcing this change to the public, to boost applicant numbers. Option C. Create a special conditional admission category for students who narrowly miss the minimum score requirements, allowing them to enroll with the understanding that they must pass remedial courses during their first semester. Option D. Focus marketing efforts on highlighting the university's strengths and campus life, while downplaying the specific details of the entrance examination's difficulty to create a more appealing perception for potential applicants. The correct answer is A. Publicly communicate the actual, unaltered minimum score requirements for all subjects of the entrance examination, while also providing resources and guidance to prospective students on how to prepare effectively for these requirements. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the university's desire to attract students and the ethical obligation to provide accurate and transparent information regarding admission requirements. Misrepresenting these requirements, even with the intention of increasing enrollment, constitutes a serious breach of academic integrity and regulatory compliance. The Al-Hawash Private University Entrance Exam Framework, while not explicitly detailed here, would universally uphold principles of honesty and fairness in its admissions processes. The correct approach involves a commitment to transparency and adherence to established admission criteria. This means clearly communicating the actual requirements to prospective students, even if this might lead to a lower initial number of applicants. This approach aligns with the fundamental ethical duty of educational institutions to act with integrity and to ensure that students are admitted based on genuine qualifications, thereby upholding the reputation and academic standards of Al-Hawash Private University. This also prevents potential future issues with student retention and academic performance if students are admitted without meeting the necessary prerequisites. An incorrect approach would be to subtly alter or downplay the difficulty of certain entrance exam components to make them appear more accessible. This is a direct violation of principles of honesty and fairness. It misleads prospective students, potentially leading them to invest time and resources in an application process based on false pretenses. This could also lead to a cohort of students who are not adequately prepared for the academic rigor of the university, negatively impacting their success and the university's academic standing. Another incorrect approach would be to prioritize meeting enrollment targets over the integrity of the admissions process by admitting students who clearly do not meet the minimum requirements. This undermines the purpose of the entrance exam as a measure of preparedness and devalues the qualifications of students who have met the standards. It also creates an unfair advantage for those admitted improperly and can lead to a decline in academic quality. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a thorough understanding of the university's admission policies and the ethical guidelines governing educational institutions. When faced with pressure to meet targets, professionals must prioritize adherence to these policies and guidelines. This involves open communication with superiors about potential conflicts between targets and ethical obligations, and advocating for transparent and fair practices. The focus should always be on the long-term integrity and reputation of the institution, rather than short-term gains achieved through deceptive means. Question 18. Consider a scenario where a prospective student approaches you, an administrative staff member at Hawash Private University, shortly before the entrance examination. The student expresses significant anxiety about a specific section of the exam and requests a brief, informal consultation with an instructor from that department to clarify a few concepts, believing this will greatly improve their performance. Option A. Advise the student to study harder and assure them that the exam is designed to be challenging for all applicants. Option B. Inform the student that all examination-related inquiries must be directed through the official admissions office and that no informal consultations with instructors are permitted during the pre-examination period, as per university policy. Option C. Suggest that the student contact the admissions office to inquire about any available academic support resources or formal review sessions that might be offered by the university. Option D. Agree to arrange a brief, informal meeting between the student and an instructor from the relevant department to address their concerns before the exam. The correct answer is B. Inform the student that all examination-related inquiries must be directed through the official admissions office and that no informal consultations with instructors are permitted during the pre-examination period, as per university policy. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a student's desire for academic advancement and the university's commitment to academic integrity and fair assessment. The university entrance exam is designed to evaluate a candidate's foundational knowledge and aptitude, and any deviation from the established examination protocols undermines the validity of this assessment process. The challenge lies in upholding the principles of fairness, transparency, and academic honesty, while addressing the student's request in a manner that is both compassionate and compliant with university regulations. The correct approach involves adhering strictly to the Hawash Private University's established examination regulations and policies. This means that any request for special accommodations or modifications to the examination process must be formally submitted through the designated channels and evaluated based on documented criteria. The university's regulations are designed to ensure a level playing field for all applicants and to maintain the integrity of the admissions process. Therefore, a response that directs the student to the appropriate administrative office for formal consideration of their request, based on documented university policy, is the most professionally sound and ethically defensible action. This upholds the principle of equal treatment and ensures that any exceptions are made through a transparent and regulated process. An incorrect approach would be to directly grant the student's request without following established procedures. This bypasses the university's regulatory framework and creates an unfair advantage for the student, violating the principle of equal opportunity for all applicants. It also sets a dangerous precedent, potentially encouraging similar requests from other students and eroding the credibility of the examination process. Another incorrect approach would be to dismiss the student's request outright without providing guidance on the proper channels for seeking assistance. This demonstrates a lack of professionalism and empathy, failing to address the student's concerns constructively and potentially causing unnecessary distress. Furthermore, offering personal advice or making a unilateral decision outside of the established policy would be a breach of professional conduct, as it deviates from the defined responsibilities and authority within the university's administrative structure. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve a clear understanding of the relevant university regulations and policies. When faced with a request that falls outside the standard procedure, the professional should first identify the applicable policies and procedures. If the request is valid but requires a formal process, the individual should guide the requester to the appropriate department or individual responsible for handling such matters. If the request is not permissible under existing regulations, the professional should clearly and respectfully explain the reasons, referencing the relevant policies, and offer alternative, permissible solutions if available. The overarching principle is to act with integrity, fairness, and adherence to the established governance of the institution. Question 19. The performance metrics show that a significant number of candidates completed the quantitative reasoning section of the Hawash private university entrance exam in a remarkably short period, well below the average historical completion time. Considering the absolute priority of the Hawash private university entrance exam regulatory framework, what is the most appropriate initial course of action? Option A. Assume that candidates have become exceptionally proficient and that no further action is required, as the performance metrics do not explicitly indicate a violation of the Hawash private university entrance exam regulatory framework. Option B. Implement a revised time limit for the quantitative reasoning section in future exams to better align with the observed performance, without first consulting the existing regulations. Option C. Inform the candidates that their performance indicates a need for further assessment in future academic pursuits, based solely on the speed of their section completion. Option D. Immediately investigate potential irregularities or breaches of exam protocol, cross-referencing any findings with the specific rules and guidelines outlined in the Hawash private university entrance exam regulatory framework. Correct answer is D. Immediately investigate potential irregularities or breaches of exam protocol, cross-referencing any findings with the specific rules and guidelines outlined in the Hawash private university entrance exam regulatory framework. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to interpret and apply regulatory requirements in a context where performance data might suggest a deviation from standard procedures. The core of the challenge lies in balancing the need for efficiency and achieving performance targets with the absolute imperative of adhering to the Hawash private university's entrance exam regulatory framework. Misinterpreting or overlooking these regulations can lead to serious consequences, including invalidating the exam process or facing disciplinary action. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the Hawash private university's entrance exam regulations to determine if the observed performance metrics, even if seemingly suboptimal, are within acceptable parameters, or if they indicate a breach of specific rules. This approach prioritizes regulatory compliance above all else, ensuring that the integrity of the entrance examination process is maintained. The justification for this approach is rooted in the absolute priority of adhering to the specified regulatory framework for the Hawash private university entrance exam. Any deviation, even if seemingly minor or driven by a desire to improve performance, must be assessed against these specific rules. The regulations are designed to ensure fairness, standardization, and the validity of the examination, and their strict observance is paramount. An incorrect approach would be to assume that the performance metrics, if they indicate a faster than usual completion time for a section, automatically imply a problem that needs immediate, non-regulatory intervention. This fails to acknowledge the absolute priority of the regulatory framework. Another incorrect approach would be to implement changes to the exam administration based solely on the performance metrics without consulting the specific regulations. This bypasses the established rules and could introduce new compliance issues. A third incorrect approach would be to ignore the performance metrics entirely, assuming they are irrelevant. While regulatory compliance is absolute, ignoring data that might signal a procedural issue, even if the issue is simply that candidates are performing exceptionally well, could be a missed opportunity for process review within the bounds of the regulations. The fundamental regulatory failure in these incorrect approaches is the lack of strict adherence to the Hawash private university entrance exams regulatory framework as the primary guide for action. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should begin with a clear understanding that the specified regulatory framework is the absolute priority. Any observed data, whether performance metrics or other indicators, must be evaluated through the lens of these regulations. If the data suggests a potential issue, the first step is always to consult the relevant sections of the Hawash private university entrance exam regulations. If the regulations provide clear guidance, that guidance must be followed. If the regulations are ambiguous or do not directly address the situation, then seeking clarification from the appropriate regulatory authority or designated university official responsible for the entrance exam administration is the next critical step, always ensuring that any action taken remains within the spirit and letter of the existing framework. Question 20. The investigation demonstrates that an applicant for the Hawash private university entrance exam has submitted a personal statement that contains claims about extracurricular achievements which appear to contradict the details provided in their official academic transcript and supplementary documentation. What is the most appropriate course of action for the admissions committee? Option A. Discuss the observed inconsistency with other university staff members not directly involved in the admissions decision to gather opinions on how to proceed. Option B. Immediately disqualify the applicant from consideration due to the apparent inconsistency, assuming a deliberate attempt to mislead the admissions committee. Option C. Proceed with the admission of the applicant as planned, overlooking the discrepancy to avoid potential delays or complications in the admissions process. Option D. Conduct a thorough review of all submitted documents, including the personal statement and official academic records, and if a significant discrepancy persists, request further clarification or evidence from the applicant before making a final decision. The correct answer is D. Conduct a thorough review of all submitted documents, including the personal statement and official academic records, and if a significant discrepancy persists, request further clarification or evidence from the applicant before making a final decision. Explanation. The investigation demonstrates a scenario where a student applicant has provided information that appears to be inconsistent with their academic records during the Hawash private university entrance exam process. This situation is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the university's commitment to academic integrity and fair admissions with the need to handle applicant information discreetly and ethically. The admissions committee must ensure that the process is fair to all applicants while also upholding the university's standards. The correct approach involves a thorough, impartial review of the applicant's submitted documents against their official academic transcripts. This process should be conducted by designated university personnel, following established procedures for verifying applicant credentials. The regulatory framework for university admissions, as implicitly governed by the principles of academic integrity and fair practice expected of educational institutions, mandates that admissions decisions be based on accurate and verifiable information. Any discrepancies must be investigated systematically and fairly, ensuring the applicant has an opportunity to clarify or provide further documentation. This upholds the principle of due process and ensures that decisions are not made on assumptions or incomplete information, aligning with the ethical obligation to treat applicants equitably. An incorrect approach would be to immediately reject the applicant based on the initial suspicion of inconsistency without further investigation. This fails to adhere to the principle of due process and could lead to an unfair rejection if the discrepancy is due to a simple administrative error or misunderstanding. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore the discrepancy and proceed with the admission, as this compromises the university's commitment to academic integrity and could set a precedent for accepting potentially falsified information, undermining the credibility of the admissions process. Furthermore, discussing the applicant's specific situation with unauthorized personnel or other applicants would be a severe breach of confidentiality and professional ethics, violating privacy regulations and trust. Professionals in university admissions should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes fact-finding, adherence to established policies, and ethical conduct. This involves 1. Identifying the discrepancy. 2. Initiating a formal, documented review process. 3. Seeking clarification from the applicant if necessary, providing them with a reasonable opportunity to respond. 4. Making a decision based on the verified facts and university policies. 5. Maintaining confidentiality throughout the process.